Gotta be fucking kidding me. So, this is part of the problem with being sick and trying to live a normal life. I'm trying to go to the emergency room because I can't breathe. My roommate's falling down. I'm falling down. We're getting dizzy. My muscles in my arms and legs are hurting when we close the windows and the mold builds up. When we see the rain coming in the building the next day, we get very sick. So, we're going back to the emergency room, but wouldn't you know it, I have to oh, I have to take a poop 3 minutes before the bus is showing up. And I spent 3 hours this morning trying to go, and I had a blockage and nothing wanted to come out. So if I don't go now, it could get stuck in me for 3 days, and then I could have to go to the emergency room to get an enema again. Which, if you've seen any of my other videos, I had to enemize myself at work early in the morning and have somebody pick one up. I'm literally using the bathroom and crapping right now as the bus blows me past. So this is the problem with being ill, sick, and trying to live a normal life. It doesn't work. You need medical care. You need documentation of your medical issues. And I'm 25 years behind on the most important one that causes seizures, that causes me to not be able to walk, causes me not to be able to use my arms, and causes me not to be able to talk at times, triggered by cold, flashing lights, touch, things like that. But does any of my doctors know about this before 10 years ago? Yeah, I told them. But my mother said, don't pay no attention to him. So the doctors listened to the mother when I was 7 years old, when I was shaking after an overdose, when I had a seizure in New Mexico outside and went unconscious, and the staff members came out 2 hours later and said I was the only kid out there and there was no staff members. Did I get medical care then? Did anybody report this to a doctor? Of course not. There was no staff members out there. They left me by myself in back of a tree, freezing to death, shaking on the ground until I had a full-blown seizure. After my seizure, I went unconscious, and because I was unconscious, I didn't hear the staff members calling from about a football field away in a cabin because it's so cold that the staff members don't want to come up and round up the kids. They just want to yell and ring a bell and expect all the kids to come in. But I've had a seizure and I have fallen, which they've seen me shake. They've seen me have problems with the cold every single time we go out in the cold. But I don't know this because I'm unconscious on the ground. So hours later, now all the kids are inside playing with their Legos while I'm outside unconscious. 2 hours, 3 hours later, the staff member comes out, finds me unconscious, tries to wake me up. Now remember, I've had a seizure. I've woken back up from the seizure. I've shaken some more. My head went back in the coat, and I passed back out. Now, the staff members left me out there because I didn't come when the bell was rang because I'm unconscious on the ground in an icy lot and behind a tree, really far away. So, they go looking for me hours later when they see I'm not in the group, and they find me. And they carry me inside, and they give me a hot cup of chocolate, put a blanket over me, and then hours later, they never discuss this again. I'm not even sure if my parents were notified of this event, because my father cared about me so much, my mother cared about me so much, that they saw me 18 hours in those 18 months. Yes, my father and mother cared about me so much that they spent 18 hours in those 18 months seeing me. And I was only allowed to call my parents with permission of staff. So if they were doing something wrong, you better believe we weren't allowed to use the phone. They even recorded us and set up a bunch of footage. Yes, they told us to be at our best behavior, put us in a circle to play with toys, made sure it was a good view, and told us if any of us acted up, they were going to choke us out. Then, after, they put on the camera, or they said they were going to give us a restraint by Toby. Now, what that was is he would take our arms, put it up against our necks, and pull until our windpipe was collapsed and we couldn't breathe. He would also throw us around like rag dolls and sometimes bruise us up. Now, the other staff members used to do restraints over the chest and only do it so your arms wouldn't be a danger to other people. But Toby liked to pull them as hard as he could. He thought it meant pull on the arms as hard as he could, and he liked to raise the arms to neck level, especially with the 13-year-old heavyset kid. Oh, he liked to strangle that heavyset kid until that kid turned blue. Yes, was my childhood. No education, wandering around the woods, having seizures. And then my father wants to act like this is a fantasy, like I made this all up. He knows that I was up there in New Mexico. He knows that he brought me to Texas. He knows that I spoke up in the doctor's office in Westford. He knows I couldn't move my body properly. He knows the teacher said I had a coordination issue. He knows I went to physical therapy. He knows my mother was messing around with pills my whole life. He knows my mother was taking pills that were mine. He knows that she took Vicodin that were prescribed to me. He knows all these pills were in the house. Xanax, from Percocet to Ritalin to all different types of Thorazine to Seroquel to Haldol to Lamictal to lithium. All these, going back to the age of 7 years old in Westford, there was pills everywhere. He also knows my mother acted unstable at times. He remembers it from car rides home. He remembers her acting unstable a lot of the time. My family members remember her acting crazy during Christmas. A lot of people were glad she was dead, I'm sorry to say it, but after she passed away, some people came up to me, her own grandson, came up and said, "Why are you mad? Aren't you glad that she's dead finally?" My own nephew, at her funeral, came up to me and asked me if I was glad. How could I be sad that she's dead? That's how apparent her abuse was to everybody, that they could not understand why I was sad at their funeral. Everybody expected me to be happy at her funeral, to do a dance on her grave, but instead I was sad. I honored her death. I did. I was one of her only sons that acted appropriate during her funeral. Tim? No. Jeff didn't show up. I was the only son at the funeral that acted very appropriate and stayed and honored her. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, and she took my health to the grave, and what she did to me was wrong, but that does not mean I should act wrong. So I did the right thing, and then my father swoops in and tries to take the whole inheritance that according to the federal government I was entitled to. Yes, there was a retirement that me and my father were supposed to apply to collect. My mother left a lot of money in her retirement, her Social Security, and her children were able to collect it that were adults, and I was an adult, as well as the husband. But the husband decided to leave the son out of it by preventing him from ever being able to go and apply, preventing him from going to any of the hearings or any of the information where it's given out. Anyways, so yes, my own nephew, my mother's own grandson, asked why am I crying at my mother's funeral? Shouldn't I be happy? My own brother said the same thing. How can you be sad about this? She did awful things to you. Then my own best friend, Dan, who drove my girlfriends, drove me to my baseball games, basically was like a second father. The things my father didn't want to do, like transport me, or discuss women with me, or try to do the right thing with me, or show me how to drive, Dan did. Anyway, so Dan saw me upset about my mother's death. He goes, "How can you be upset about her after all the things she did to you?" I said, "Well, it has to do with my health. I don't know what to do now. I'm all confused now because I was supposed to get her to admit to what she's doing, but now I'll never know what she was doing." And then he goes, "Oh, yes. Isn't it funny how you forget all the bad things that somebody does to you, and you remember the good things, and it gets much and much harder to remember the bad things after they die. I said, yeah, but some of these bad things haunt me for life, and I'll never forget. And so we had a whole conversation about this, me and Dan. I tried to bring it up to my father, but he doesn't want to have any conversations. All he says is, don't talk bad about it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Screaming like a lunatic that he doesn't want to hear about me. He just wants me to die. That's it. No, 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 just die. My wife died, now you die. That's my father's attitude. He'd rather me suffer and die than have a conversation about his second wife and what she did to me. I'm not even kidding. He'd rather see his own son suffer and die. He has seen me suffer. There's been emergency room calls to him about my suffering, but he ignores the calls now and tries to pretend them or twist them up, or doesn't contact me and just literally adds details. Like, for instance, there was a time where I had frostbite and I was about to lose all my toes, and I was living in the woods, and I used a glass bottle and cut my skin, went back into the emergency room with the frostbite, and they gave me 30 days off my feet for my toes to heal. Now, what would my father say? For one, if he did get the call, he probably twisted it all up into, he's just suicidal, that's it. Something like that, a really simple one-liner that gets me hurt. That's it. There's no context, no detail. Just try to make me seem mental, even though the whole system that I had to deal with was mental. He could have bought me a pair of boots. I was wearing sandals and sneakers that were literally meant for summer through winter, till the point where my toes and feet swelled up. First they turned pink, then they turned red, then they turned a purplish, reddish pink. Then they started turning like a purplish, blackish tint on them. Really looked really bad. They were really swollen too, but then on the tip the swelling started going down, what was weird. But it really got dark. By the third trip to the emergency room, they said that if I came back, they were going to have to remove my toes. So when I came back with other injuries that allowed the emergency room to keep me overnight for more than 1 hour, because they kept on releasing me back to walk around on my feet, and none of the places let me sit either. I had to keep walking for days and days and days in the snow with my feet soaking wet, days and days, as my feet get worse and worse, and the doctors say they're going to chop off my toes. All that context. They don't give you any of that, even though it's all on the emergency room record. I mean, I made a visit, then I made another visit, then I made another visit, all for the feet only. Then the fourth visit has cuts on my arm from a glass bottle, me not wanting to live in the woods, saying the woods is hell, and that if I have to go back to living in the woods with frostbite on my toes, then yes, I feel suicidal. But if I can go someplace where I'm not going to lose my toes, then I will feel fine. And that's all I told the emergency room. If you release me to someplace where I can keep my toes, then I will not feel suicidal. But if your plan is to chop off my toes, then I'm going to be very upset at that, and I'm not going to want to live like that. And then they actually got me evaluated. I got to keep my toes, and thank God they went back to normal. We were literally seconds away from losing all my toes. I wasn't happy about that. All because I didn't have a place to stay, and I didn't have a shoes, and no place would allow me to work, and I couldn't collect my Social Security because my father came in and collected it for me. He wanted the money. So now I have no inheritance, I have no way to work, I have no way to collect Social Security, I have nowhere to live, I'm living in the woods, I'm about to lose my toes, and the hospital says all I can do is keep walking in circles. What did I do to get out of this, by the way? I spent 4 years helping the elderly, and then I got an offer to move to New Hampshire and take care of somebody who was getting evicted. I came up here, and 7 years later, I'm still in the same apartment. Longest I've ever been in one spot. My father and mother kept me moving my whole life. Westward, Texas, New Mexico, through Texas, Maine, Lowell, Chelmsford, Westford, Haverhill, just everywhere around. This is the longest I've been in one spot, is the 7 years in Rochester, New Hampshire. And now I'm not sure if I'll get to live, because I still can't collect Social Security. I still can't work without getting injured. I still can't use a shelter. I still can't drive. I still fall down in the cold and can't use my legs in the cold. I still can't use my arms properly in the cold. I still can't talk in certain times. And now, because my health is failing in so many ways, things get in the way of me doing simple stuff like going to the emergency room. I just missed the fucking bus and gotta take the next one. But then on top of this, watch, I go to the emergency room so late because I was dizzy and couldn't get up and move my legs this morning. I got the windows open and finally get some strength to get down the stairs so I know I can make it to the bus stop. Then I have to take a poop or it'll get stuck inside of me. Then I do that and get to the emergency room at 3 o'clock. Then I get released at 10 o'clock, but I have no transportation, once again thanks to my father. I could be driving if we got this looked into at the age of a teenager, but instead my mother and father wanted to hide this. When I got brought into the living room and told them I was bumping into stuff, instead of bringing me to a doctor or a neurologist, my mother made it into a mental illness. She said I was self-harming and doing it on purpose. I told her that was not true. That no, I'm bumping into stuff and this is all the time. But she did not want to look into that. She does not want to look into what she did to me. She wants to turn everything into a mental illness, so we got nowhere. I got nowhere with her or my father. We're still getting nowhere with him because all he wants to do is hurt me more by making up more mental illnesses, calling this a fantasy, calling it made up so doctors will not help me. Then I'm stuck treating myself again, what I don't want to do. It's been like 8 years since I've tried to treat myself with any drugs or alcohol. No Ativans, no Trileptols, no nothing. I only get Trileptol as a prescription from the neurologist. I take CBDV with the permission of my neurologist and working with Biopharma Industries, who makes my CBD. So everything I take for this is prescribed by my neurologist and cleared by my neurologist. But my neurologist keeps on having to drop out on me thanks to my father. He got involved with his new wife calling on his behalf, and they told him that all this is a fantasy and not to help me once again. It's all a mental illness, it's all a fantasy, so don't help him. Then I'm at square one again after 25 years. They keep on restarting and putting up walls so I can't get help with a disability.